From the kitchen of the cabin and around the world, this is Voices from the Solitude, a podcast about the coronavirus and gaming. Today I'm speaking to Isaac Shalev. We talk about the effects on the industry and his thoughts on the future. So I'm here with Isaac Shalev, and primarily, well, I'm talking to you for two reasons. One, because you're clever, and so having you on the show sort of elevates people's perception of my cleverness. But also, you recently wrote an article for The Manifold, sort of talking about COVID and board games and that intersection. And what was really interesting is that you weren't a prophet of doom. You actually seemed reasonably upbeat, reasonably positive about the whole prospect to the board game industry. Can you sort of elaborate on that and sort of give us a précis of what that article is?
So that, first of all, thank you for having me back on again. And even if it's motivated by a desire to bask under some kind of halo, I still appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. I certainly feel like I've become smarter by doing so. So don't be so down on yourself, Ben.
Well, that's the beauty of being me, you see, is that I make everyone feel smart.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something about being able to go down on yourself, but that's fine. We can go with what you said. I
wouldn't leave the house now. Oh, hang on a minute.
I by the way, I just want to say to everyone listening that if you've been listening to this series so far, which I just think has been an astonishing work, and I've enjoyed it tremendously, being able to hear from industry luminaries and how they're thinking about and how they're feeling about this apocalypse that we're experiencing. So it's something special, I think, that Ben is doing here, and I'm just grateful to be a part of it. So thank you for having me on again. I'll go back to my snarky personality now. The piece I wrote for The Manifold is really about why we care about board games and why our reaction within this hobby to an extremely challenging situation and a tragic situation has been not to put away trivial things, right? Not to look at our games and say, oh, this is kind of a nice diversion, a distraction. It was a nice hobby, but now we've really got to focus ourselves on life and death, on what really matters. It's actually been the opposite. It's been a doubling down. It's been an emphasis on how do we continue to carry games forward? How do we continue to make them part of our lives? And I just asked, why do we feel that way about them? It seems unusual that we would treat games with such reverence. So why do we? What are they doing for us, and where do they fit into our lives, into our emotional landscape?
And so, thinking about that, are you surprised by the reaction of people? Indie Boards and Cards recently announced a virtual convention, and people are playing games over Zoom and over Facebook and all of this sort of stuff. Are you surprised by people's reaction? Is it sort of, when we're apathetic and everything's sort of bouncing along normal, it gives us the license to be horrible to each other? Is it times like this that kind of reveals the character, and if you want to be sort of optimistic, that actually we're all pretty good when you boil down to it?
Yeah, I can't say that our response is healthy or prescient or well balanced. I don't actually think that that's what's happening. I think that we're reacting the way that humans do, which is to say, we're typically short-sighted. We typically overreact. We are vulnerable to things like self-denial, and many mental health professionals have commented that the way that the world is reacting to the coronavirus is similar to grieving, that people are going through those 5 stages of grief, where you have denial and anger, and I think that we're seeing some of that too. And to me, a lot of what we're seeing in the board game community is to some extent a kind of a bargaining, that we're engaging in this and we're thinking about, how can we keep playing, and we're inviting each other to participate in new ways and so forth, as a kind of bargaining, as a kind of normalizing, as a way of saying whatever is happening in the world, we can hold on to this. This is some level of normalcy that that will help sustain us. I don't think it's true everywhere. And this is where it gets hard. I haven't heard from, for example, a lot of designers or publishers in Italy. I don't know what life is like there. I know Ares Games, announced basically that they're closed, and that's at the epicenter of the biggest outbreak in the West. And so I don't know if they're Skyping and board gaming over Zoom and whatever, or if the tragedy there has escalated to the point where there really isn't attention and time for those sorts of things. In the US, in most places, we're not at that stage, but this episode is recorded, roughly a week in advance. And in coronavirus time, a week is, 3 years. With exponential growth, in New York City, near where I live, infection rates are doubling every 3 days, roughly. So anything that I say today may sound tinny and out of touch in a week.
So talking about the prosaic finances and business, what do you think sort of are the ramifications for the board game industry? And sort of what changes do you think this will bring on the board game landscape looking in the next sort of 18 months to 5 years?
So at that range, it's a pretty disastrous event. I don't think that there's a way to sugarcoat that. It's a pretty disastrous event for the economy at large. So I don't know that board games will deviate substantially one way or the other. But let's break it down like this. Let's talk about supply and let's talk about demand. At the supply level, the challenges that we have are as follows. Number one is China took a break from production. China is where the overwhelming majority of games or game components are made. If I had to guess, I would say that 80% of the board games being made have some element of production happening in China that you can't replace. So essentially, if China was shut down, 80% of the games being made could no longer be made. Now, China is spinning back up. I'm getting updates from Kickstarters and talking to publishers who are telling me that they are starting to see production spin back up in China. So there was an interruption that is now being repaired, but it's not clear that that will last forever, in the sense that we don't know what's going to happen with the virus going forward, and whether there will be new waves of infection and whether there will be new waves of lockdowns and so forth. We don't know, but that's certainly within the prediction of many experts that we're going to enter into sort of an 18-month period of cycling. And that's going to be very, very challenging. That's going to make supply of games go down. And for publishers, so think about it at every line along the chain. Publishers can print fewer games. Distributors are having trouble because they can't be open right now to receive games. Any state in which essential business, non-essential business has been shut down, those warehouses are closed. So the publisher can't send the game to the distributor, and the distributor can't send the game to the retailer, and the retailer can't sell the game at the store. So the only flow of product is happening either direct from retail, direct from publisher. So publishers who have a bunch of boxes in their basement or their garage or wherever it is, and are able to access them as individuals, right? Small publishers who can go to their garage and pull out a box and put it in the mail. They can sell games, and online game shops that are in places that aren't shut down yet, right? Places where those work restrictions don't exist. That's the only supply. Now, All of this is temporary, and even under relatively more dire predictions, will only last for a couple of months. But that creates an enormous cash flow problem. Because publishers, game publishers in general, and certainly distributors too, live on a very tight margin where the money that they earn from a game today goes to pay for product that's going to come out tomorrow, right? And so if you don't get money in today, you can't pay for product tomorrow, and then you have no product to sell tomorrow, and then you're done, right? Like that's what happens when you interrupt cash flow. There's not a lot of working capital. And we've talked a lot about undercapitalized businesses in the past. How many publishers have working capital to last them for 6 months? Very, very few. So some of them are shutting down preemptively or trying to cut expenses as sharply as possible, laying off staff, and trying to get to, trying to stem that tide of money out to ride this out. But, some of them are going to close, and some of them already have closed. They haven't announced it. They haven't come out and said, "Hey, we're done," but they have, in the sense that they've shut down in terms of continuing to try and make games that are in the pipeline. They're no longer pushing projects forward, and they may never come back. So that's on the supply side. And that's going to hurt distributors too. I suspect that we're going to see, there are major distributors who have already stopped working, right? So Alliance, ACD, I believe GTS as well, basically announced here in the US, they can't do anything, right? They can't ship, they can't fulfill, and so they're just not working. I think they're in a somewhat better situation in the sense that they're carrying a bunch of inventory that they will be able to sell at some point. But I'm very pessimistic about distributors most of all. And I think that the publishers have an incentive to build more direct-to-customer relationships during this time, right? Because they can make that sale. And distributors don't have anyone to sell to in stores, and it's not clear when stores become a thing again. So between publishers going direct to customers and online game stores going direct to customers, distributors and retail are going to take the brunt of the losses here.
And do you think this could possibly put the nail, finally hammer the nail into the distribution coffin that Asmodee is trying to kill in America? Could it be that Asmodee now end up being the only game in town, and the coronavirus basically gives them what they were setting out to do?
I don't think that Asmodee benefits disproportionately here at all, to be honest. The first nail in distribution's coffin was not Asmodee. It was the online game store. I think distribution was short-sighted and didn't recognize that the online game store was as dangerous to them as it was to local game stores. But basically, that to me is more the issue. Look, Asmodee is going to be a distributor, and they're self-distributing their own product as well. And they have more than many other publishers actually put their chips in on local game stores, right? So the Asmodee model isn't that local game stores don't matter and we're just going to ship direct to customers. Just the opposite. The Asmodee model is distributors are not providing enough value. Let's eliminate them and take their margin and service stores, whom we will shower with promotion and support for play and so forth. So I think Asmodee is actually in a tough spot because the number of stores is going to decline. Not every store is going to come back from this, and the that notion that we had that the way that gaming goes forward into the future is by game stores becoming community spaces is under substantial pressure right now. I don't know that I want to go back to the game store to play games, and I've been going for 10 years. But in a world that is dealing with an uncontrolled viral infection, right? Until such time as we get a vaccine, I have yet to be diagnosed. I have yet, thank goodness, to contract COVID, and I don't want to go anywhere where I might get it. So I might be comfortable with having people come into my home if I know that they've had it already, or if I know that they haven't, but I trust their distancing procedures. But there's no way I'm going back to a store.
I mean, how long do you think? I mean, obviously, you can't put a time. You can't put a definite time on this, but how long do you think that squeamishness will last? I mean, humans seem to be very quick to forget, right?
So the scary answer is that I will know much better in 3 weeks, because that's when the virus is predicted to peak here in my area, which is the New York City area. And the predictions for peak, the non-hysterical predictions for peak, suggest deaths in the 1,000 to 3,000 every 2 or 3 days during that time. That's indelible in the way that 9/11 was indelible, and will shift people's behaviors. I think that we are still at that foolish period during which the roller coaster is going up the hill, and you look down and you're like, oh, it's pretty high. Did we make a terrible mistake getting on this thing, right? And it's sort of funny and it's sort of fun because you're not in any real danger, but your body is still reacting the way that your body reacts. I think that there's still a lot of denial that we're living through. And if you're the kind of person who trades stock, I would say this is a good time to invest in companies that make masks, because we're going to be using them for the next 50 years, right? Like that the culture that we live in, I think, is going to change, and we're going to observe social distancing and personal protective equipment, and there'll be fashion, right? There'll be fashion around it and so forth, and we'll subsume it into our culture. But until there's a vaccine for this, we can't go back to normal life, and I don't think we will. And once there's a vaccine for this, it's not clear to me that the scars will fade all that quickly.
So we've sort of started tentatively treading into this area, but sort of, how is it going with you? How are you bearing up sort of mentally? I mean, you work from home anyway, but the kids are home. Before we recorded, you talked about it's Passover, and this is a difficult time, and sort of there are ructions in the Orthodox Jewish world over this sort of thing. How are you doing?
So personally, I think I'm probably in a better place than many, in the sense that both my wife and I are still working and don't anticipate disruptions to our work in the same way that many people are just completely laid off. So that's a source of comfort and relief. I do have my kids home. This is my 15th day. 16th day. This is the 16th day that my kids and I are all home. School's been closed, and so I'm working with them every day from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Fortunately, the school is sending assignments and doing video lessons and helping ensure some kind of normalcy through this period. But that's 6 hours that I'm doing that, right? And then I have to fit my regular work day into the rest of the day, and still manage with everything else, right? So with shopping and cooking and cleaning, and everything now happens in the house, right? So there isn't, let's just go out for pizza tonight. And those are relatively small sacrifices, but it's just a shift, right? It's, oh, right, I have to cook today. Did I take something out of the freezer to defrost? Do I have what I need? When is our next shopping run? We're trying to do it every 2 weeks, not every week. So what do I have here? What's going to last? What's in cans? A lot of mental energy is being spent over there. My wife's a doctor, and so she is exposed every day to COVID. So whatever I do, I can stay home. I can, diligently wash hands. But every day my wife walks into the house having spent a day exposed. She still has equipment. She isn't exposed in some of the worst ways. She's not treating COVID patients primarily. She's a pediatrician. But she's regularly exposed. And so there's a psychological toll of, your wife walks in and you're like, is today the day that she brings it home? That said, I also have had family who have been infected and who have recovered, and friends who have been infected and who have recovered. And in many cases, it's an extremely mild, almost unnoticeable illness. And in some cases, it's a ton of bricks, but then you get over it. So it's not a death sentence. It's not, oh my God, we're going to catch this, and then half the people who catch it die. But it's terrifying because there's very little that you can do about it, even as we're doing so much, right? Even as I've turned my life upside down, we all have our capacity to really control this is so small right now.
And, obviously, this is bigger than the world of gaming. But I recorded an episode of The Guild the other day, and I was recording it with Steve, and he said basically, he's getting to the point now where he's just really fucking missing it because playing games is about sitting around a table, about, losing the burden of screens that, feels like it sucks our soul daily. How are you missing games and gaming?
Well, I am fortunate in that regard, in that I am home with 4 other people, and I play games with my kids just about every night. So every night, as part of the bedtime ritual, I play a game with my 2 younger kids, and then another game with my oldest son. And so that hasn't stopped. And as they've gotten older, the gaming changes complexion, right? It used to be something that we did as a fun activity and as a way to be close with one another, but it wasn't really about the game itself. In many cases, we weren't really playing by the rules, and we were playing with games as toys, and it didn't fulfill the adult gaming needs that many of us play games for. But last week I played, Wingspan and King Domino with my older son, and he beat me. Right. So he beat me 2 out of 3, in fact. So that is adult gaming, right? I mean, yes, also we were playing Wingspan and he couldn't find a way to get 3 rats to play, the giant bird that he wanted to play. And he was upset enough to have to leave the table for a minute to compose himself, which is, less common in adult gaming. But nevertheless, I'm playing games and I'm still getting that release in my life. So that hasn't been as bad. What I'm missing is going out and being at the store and being in that environment, because the people that I spend time with at the game store, I essentially spend time with at no other juncture, right? Like, I see them at the game store, a little bit at conventions, right? Some of them also go to conventions, but that's it, right? They don't come around the house for a beer on a Thursday night or something, right? It's just, that's where our relationship is, and that's largely gone. So there's been some efforts. There's a WhatsApp group to try and coordinate online games, and I don't know. For me, online gaming has almost no appeal. And I've tried, right? I've tried to I've tried to organize a game, or I've tried to whatever, and I find it's not the experience I want. It doesn't do it's like taking a shower wearing a raincoat. I'm not interested. It's not the experience. It feels off. It feels distant. I have other things I can be doing. And maybe if I was alone and couldn't play games at all, I wouldn't feel that way. And certainly others may enjoy it differently, but for me, that hasn't been an answer.
Excellent. Well, thank you for giving over your time, and I hope that your predictions don't bear fruit and turn out to be absolutely wrong, and that we all get to actually sit in a room with each other and have a beer at some point.
I look forward to it. I certainly hope that I'm wrong, and that our societies as a whole take this seriously and bend all efforts to solving the problem that we've got. But to everybody out there, please stay healthy, stay safe, stay at home if you can, listen to all the local ordinances, and play a board game if you can.
If you want to support content like this, you can go to patreon.com/5G4D. Thank you for listening. Stay safe, and if you can, stay at home.